The audience erupts into waves of laughter under the harsh studio lights. Diana Maxwell, the talk show host known for her biting sarcasm and confrontational interview style, flashes Keanu Reeves a condescending smile. With calculated emphasis meant to draw more amusement from the crowd, she asks, "So Keanu, do you honestly believe some higher power is watching over you, especially after everything you've been through?" More laughter follows. The camera focuses on Keanu, perfectly still, completely calm. His fingers lightly touch the small cross hanging from his neck. His eyes show no anger or defensiveness, only a profound serenity. He doesn't leap to defend himself. He simply exists in the moment, fully present, as something remarkable begins to unfold. What Diana couldn't possibly know was that she stood at the edge of an experience that would not just challenge her views on faith but potentially transform her entire life. Keanu Reeves isn't merely another Hollywood celebrity. He represents someone who has suffered devastating losses yet remains standing, not through the privileges of fame, not through sheer determination alone, but through something the audience had gathered to mock that evening: genuine faith. The studio glows like a modern arena. Overhead lights intersect above, reflecting off polished black walls. The audience applauds and cheers with anticipation, as if expecting some mixture of comedy, scandal, or perhaps both. The show has built this reputation: controversy, sharp sarcasm, and interviews that feel more like verbal duels than conversations. Diana walks confidently onto the stage, triggering thunderous reaction from the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announces with theatrical flourish, "he's an actor, a producer, a motorcycle enthusiast, a cinematic icon, and apparently something of a spiritual seeker too. Please welcome, with resounding applause, the enigma himself, Keanu Reeves." The cheers become deafening. Keanu enters with unhurried steps, wearing dark jeans, a black jacket over a simple t-shirt, and hanging discreetly from his neck, a cross pendant. This accessory contrasts with his otherwise understated appearance, yet suggests deeper significance beyond mere fashion. He acknowledges the audience with a subtle nod and gentle smile, no grand entrance, no theatrical gestures. He takes his seat with the quiet confidence of someone who has weathered countless storms, seeing this moment as simply another passage in life's journey. The initial questions follow expected patterns: career developments, recent films, behind-the-scenes stories. Keanu responds thoughtfully, deliberately, with characteristic humility. The atmosphere remains pleasant, punctuated by audience laughter, but gradually, as is customary on Diana's show, the conversation's tone begins to shift. "Keanu," Diana says, her lips curving into a calculating smile, "you come across as remarkably grounded, perhaps even spiritually centered. But tell me something, do you actually believe in miracles? After everything Hollywood has shown you? After everything life has taken from you?" The audience laughs appreciatively, but Keanu doesn't join them. His expression remains composed, though reflective. He doesn't offer an immediate response. Instead, he simply listens with complete attention. "Silence, perhaps the most spiritual response possible," Diana quips, generating another round of laughter. Keanu lowers his gaze momentarily, his fingers gently touching the cross pendant, a gesture so subtle it might have gone unnoticed, yet filled with profound personal meaning. The camera zooms slightly, focusing on the cross as it moves gently with his touch. Then he looks up, his gaze direct and steady, yet still without verbal response, just complete presence in the moment. The interview continues, with Diana peppering the conversation with more jokes about spirituality, interspersed with ironic observations about faith, religious dogma, and religion as emotional escapism. The audience laughs again, though something in the atmosphere has subtly shifted, an almost imperceptible disruption in the show's customary rhythm. Then comes a more pointed challenge: "Do you honestly believe there's someone up there looking out for you?" Keanu remains silent for several heartbeats. The audience waits in expectation. It is a pivotal moment. One misplaced word would transform him into the internet's next viral meme, but if his words reflect authentic truth, perhaps something significant might transpire that evening. Then he speaks, his voice calm and measured, barely above a whisper. If I'm still standing after everything, it wasn't merely coincidence. His statement lands with the impact of a stone dropped into still waters, ripples of silence spreading throughout the studio. The laughter ceases. Audience members exchange glances, as if silently asking one another, "Did you experience that too?" The camera returns to frame the pendant, the cross now appearing weightier, more substantial than before. Not merely an accessory, but a declaration of something deeply personal. Diana attempts to redirect with another humorous remark, but the resulting laughter sounds hollow and forced. Something fundamental has shifted in the room's energy. Keanu maintains his composure, never confrontational, never defensive, simply observant and fully present in the moment. The studio director, sensing the unusual tension, signals to the camera operators to stay focused on Keanu's face, capturing every nuance of his calm demeanor contrasted against the increasingly uncomfortable atmosphere. The studio lights seem to dim slightly as the conversation progresses, though no technical adjustments have been made. The atmosphere has transformed noticeably since Keanu's quiet affirmation. What had begun as a typical evening of entertainment now hovers in an unusual liminal space, somewhere between discomfort and introspection. Diana leans forward with a strained smile. The conversation hasn't progressed according to her design, but she isn't finished yet. "So Keanu, let's explore religion since we've already broached the subject," she says with forced casualness, while the audience offers tentative laughter, noticeably more restrained than before. She begins speaking more animatedly, liberally sprinkling sarcasm throughout her commentary. "You know what I always say," she smirks with exaggerated confidence, "religion is essentially a fairy tale for those too frightened to face adulthood. All that divine plan, rhetoric, comforting, certainly, but hardly based in reality." The laughter grows louder this time, with scattered applause. Clearly, the audience is warming back up to the familiar routine. Keanu remains impassive, no eye rolling, no shifting uncomfortably, not even a sigh of exasperation. He simply holds the cross again, not clutching it dramatically or making a spectacle, just resting his fingers against it as if drawing strength or centeredness from its presence. The camera captures this subtle gesture again. There is no anxiety in his body language, no defensiveness, just profound stillness. As the audience revels in the host's jokes and verbal jabs, the screen begins a subtle transition. A narrator's voice emerges, thoughtful, reflective, almost distant. What viewers witnessed on stage that night was a man being tested, but what remained hidden was the journey that brought him to this moment. The screen fades to monochromatic images, grainy and textured, portraying fragments from Keanu's personal history, a funeral service, a tiny casket, Keanu standing beside it dressed in black, motionless, his expression hollow and vacant. A glimpse of a hospital corridor. A blurred photograph showing him holding hands with someone just outside the frame. Years later, Keanu alone on a subway car, gazing out the window, an open book resting unread in his lap. The loss of his daughter. The death of his partner. His closest friend gone. All these moments shaped the man who now sat calmly under the harsh studio lights, refusing to be provoked into defensive posturing. And yet, not once did he allow bitterness to define his existence. His profound grief transformed into grace. His silence became a form of sacred communication. Where many would have hardened, he somehow softened. Where many would have closed off, he remained open. The montage pauses, giving way to authentic voices, unscripted, raw testimonials from people whose lives had intersected with Keanu's away from the cameras and red carpets. A rideshare driver recalled, "He gave me a $500 tip. I thought he'd made a mistake, but he just smiled and said, 'You showed kindness.' The world needs more of that." A woman shared, "I encountered him at a gas station when my car was overheating. He didn't just offer help, he stayed for an entire hour. No cameras, no hurry." A fan recounted, "I was crying on a street corner. He sat down beside me as if we were old friends. He never asked why I was crying, he simply listened." These stories, collected over years, painted a portrait of someone whose faith wasn't performative or preachy, but lived quietly through consistent actions of compassion. Meanwhile, back in the studio, Diana continued her monologue, still attempting to provoke a reaction. Her voice grew more strident, her examples more exaggerated as she tried to reclaim control of the conversation that had somehow slipped from her grasp. She quoted scripture passages with theatrical mockery, imitating the cadence of traditional sermons. "The meek shall inherit the earth, yeah, good luck with that philosophy in Los Angeles," she laughed, glancing toward the audience for validation. The audience responded, though with diminished enthusiasm. Something felt different. The room no longer resonated with the same energy as before. Noticeable pauses stretched between bursts of laughter now. Several audience members had put their phones away, no longer recording for social media, instead watching the exchange with unexpected attentiveness. Keanu maintained his composed silence, a center of stillness in the increasingly strained atmosphere. Diana turned toward him again, now with a hint of frustration coloring her tone. "You're really not going to respond? I mean, do you seriously believe there's some cosmic force watching over you?" There was an edge to her voice now, almost desperate, as if she needed him to engage in the verbal sparring she was accustomed to winning. For the first time that evening, Keanu established direct eye contact with her. His gaze contained no anger, only depth and clarity. Then he spoke, "If I'm still here, if I'm still standing after everything, it wasn't merely coincidence." The audience fell completely silent for the second time that night. The energy in the room seemed to condense, not from boredom but from a sense of witnessing something authentic. Even the camera movements appeared to slow, capturing the gravity of the moment. It wasn't simply his words, it was the way he delivered them, without theatrics or performance, just unvarnished truth. The audience remained silent, and for the first time, the laughter had completely dissipated. But what would follow next would profoundly challenge everything people thought they understood about faith, suffering, and redemption. The audience sat in suspended anticipation, the kind of silence that seems to await some significant revelation. But Keanu didn't elaborate further, he didn't need to. He remained seated, his fingers still lightly touching the cross, neither concealing it nor displaying it ostentatiously, simply being present with it. Diana, sensing she might have pushed boundaries too far, shifted uncomfortably and offered a strained laugh. "Well, that certainly took a serious turn," she remarked, attempting to steer the conversation back to safer territory. "Perhaps we should discuss stunt work or puppies or something more lighthearted." A few nervous chuckles emerged from the audience but quickly faded. The atmosphere had undeniably transformed. Something profound now flowed beneath the surface of the conversation. On screen, the narrator's voice returned. "What does it truly mean to maintain faith through silence? To carry profound pain without allowing it to curdle into bitterness?" Keanu never delivered sermons or religious proclamations, yet his life itself conveyed a powerful narrative. The screen transitioned to black and white retrospective images, not from movie sets, but authentic moments from his life. Keanu at a cemetery, standing in solitude at his daughter's funeral, his expression vacant, hands gripping the sleeves of his coat, a man hollowed by unimaginable loss. Another image appeared, years later, Keanu on a New York subway train, sitting among strangers, unrecognized, hunched quietly in a corner seat, his head slightly inclined as if listening to something beyond ordinary perception. Some individuals carry burdens in isolation, not from a desire to project strength, but because the world no longer offers alternatives. More testimonials filled the audio landscape, this time layered and overlapping, a film crew member shared, he always arrived early, never complained. One day he noticed my limp and immediately offered his chair. I was just a background production assistant. A healthcare worker recounted, my mother was dying. We happened to be in the same hospital. He sat with us for 15 minutes. Never mentioned his celebrity status, just offered his presence. A man in a hooded sweatshirt, face digitally obscured, revealed, he paid for my brother's surgical procedure. No interviews, no publicity. I only discovered the truth when the hospital contacted us later. Back in the studio, Diana smiled tightly and leaned toward Keanu again. You know, people tend to romanticize suffering. They claim pain makes us deeper, more authentically human. But I believe pain is simply pain, right? It doesn't bestow wisdom, it merely destroys what matters. She laughed with audible bitterness. There was something personal in her tone now, some undercurrent of private pain bleeding through her professional facade. Keanu didn't interrupt, he simply listened with that same steady, receptive presence, not to argue or debate, but to truly witness her perspective. His eyes remained focused on her face, not with judgment but with an unusual quality of attention that seemed to create a private space within the public spectacle. Diana exhaled dramatically and waved dismissively, as if attempting to dispel the seriousness that had descended upon them. I mean, look, you wear a cross, that's perfectly fine, but you don't actually believe it signifies anything meaningful, right? It's just fashion, symbolic imagery, correct? The room held its collective breath. Keanu turned his gaze deliberately toward her, his voice steady but with a subtle emotional undercurrent that hadn't been evident previously. I don't wear it as fashion, he stated simply. I wear it as remembrance. For forgiveness. For survival. His words weren't dramatic or performative, they carried the weight of personal experience, as if he had repeated them to himself countless times during solitary moments when no audience witnessed his thoughts. The camera zoomed slightly on the pendant. This time, it didn't merely appear as an object, but as a narrative, a story the world was just beginning to comprehend. Diana fell silent momentarily. She opened her mouth to speak, then closed it again. The audience remained completely hushed, no phones illuminating faces, no restless shifting, no scattered laughter, just collective presence in the moment. The narrator's voice returned. In a culture obsessed with vocal opinions and performative debate, there's something both unsettling and sacred about someone who chooses to simply embody their beliefs through lived experience. Keanu didn't elaborate further, he simply breathed, inhaling, exhaling, maintaining space for whatever might emerge. Diana cleared her throat and attempted another smile, though it seemed forced and didn't quite reach her eyes. Something was fracturing, not visibly on stage, but within her internal landscape. What no one anticipated was that the person who had most enthusiastically mocked him was about to reveal something that would completely transform the trajectory of the program and her own personal journey. The program returned from a commercial break, but the atmosphere had noticeably shifted. The studio felt quieter, more contemplative. The audience, previously so eager to laugh at the slightest provocation, now sat wide-eyed, hearts strangely receptive, as if collectively holding their breath. Even the studio lighting seemed softer, as if the technical crew intuitively understood that what would follow wasn't part of any script or production plan. Diana returned to her position. She appeared composed but somehow different from before. Her smile remained, but it seemed to stop short of authentic joy. She glanced toward Keanu, then down at her hands, one of them trembled almost imperceptibly. She attempted to dismiss it with a laugh, but her voice betrayed her with a slight crack. Okay, she murmured, almost inaudibly, as if speaking primarily to herself, let's discuss something authentic. Keanu remained motionless, simply waiting, patient, centered, receptive to whatever might unfold. Diana drew a deep breath and leaned forward, her tone notably lower, stripped of its usual performative quality. when I was a child," she began hesitantly, "I would pray every night. I would squeeze my eyes tightly closed and ask God to make me normal. I didn't even understand what normal meant, I just believed that if I could somehow achieve normalcy, I wouldn't live in constant fear. I wouldn't feel fundamentally wrong or broken." The audience sat perfectly still. The silence no longer felt tense or awkward, it had transformed into something sacred, almost reverential. She continued speaking, her eyes now visibly glistening with emotion, "And I would pray, please don't condemn me to eternal punishment. Please just accept me exactly as I am." She paused briefly, gathering herself. But nothing happened. I waited endlessly for some indication, some voice, any response at all. She paused again, collecting her thoughts. Eventually, I stopped asking and started mocking instead, the prayers, the sacred texts, the people who maintained their faith. I convinced myself, it's all fictional, just an emotional security blanket for those who can't face reality. She offered a quiet, sad laugh, not mocking now, but revealing vulnerability. "Perhaps I wasn't really ridiculing your faith, Keanu. Maybe I was simply expressing my own unresolved pain." Keanu regarded her with gentle understanding, no judgment, no pity, just compassionate recognition of shared humanity. The camera captured his expression as he leaned slightly forward, speaking in hushed tones, "No one who suffers while reaching out in prayer is ever truly alone. Someone always hears, even if you weren't aware of it at the time." For an extended moment, nothing moved in the studio. A woman in the audience discreetly wiped away tears. Another held her breath, afraid to disrupt the fragile moment. Diana blinked slowly, her professional facade continuing to dissolve with each passing second. "I always interpreted silence as evidence that no one was listening," she whispered. "But perhaps I simply hadn't learned how to recognize the response." The camera gradually pulled back, framing both of them sitting together, no theatrical spotlights, no dramatic musical accompaniment, just two human beings authentic and unguarded before millions of viewers. Keanu didn't speak again, he didn't need to. Diana looked at him, truly saw him, and nodded almost imperceptibly, a gesture that might have meant, "Thank you," or perhaps, "I understand now," or simply, "I'm still here." The narrator's voice returned, thoughtful and measured. Sometimes the most challenging aspect of healing is acknowledging the need for it. And sometimes the most powerful confession is simply speaking one's truth without embellishment. But that moment of vulnerability marked only the beginning. What no one in the studio realized was that behind the scenes, something even more revealing was about to emerge, something not even the cameras could fully contain. Hours after the broadcast concluded, clips began circulating virally across internet platforms, Keanu's quiet presence, the visible trembling in Diana's hands, the profound silence that had descended upon the studio. It all felt remarkably different, impossibly authentic, something that couldn't be manufactured by production teams or marketing strategists. Behind the scenes, however, complications were beginning to surface. A video recorded surreptitiously by someone backstage started appearing on social media channels. Initially, it seemed inconsequential, just typical producer chatter during a commercial break. But then a voice, clear and authoritative, cut through the ambient noise. "We want the religious angle pushed hard," the voice instructed. "She needs to provoke him, get him to react emotionally, that's what generates viral clips." Another voice responded uncertainly, "Are you sure? He doesn't seem like someone who responds combatively." "Exactly, that makes it even better television." The video achieved viral status within minutes. At first, it appeared to be merely another behind-the-scenes industry revelation, but soon afterward, a former production staff member came forward in an unscripted live post. He addressed the camera, visibly anxious but determined, "I worked on that program for 3 years. There were always implicit instructions, sometimes explicitly documented, to aggressively challenge guests who expressed spiritual beliefs. It wasn't motivated by genuine curiosity, it was calculated to trigger emotional reactions, especially from guests with religious convictions. That's what network executives demanded: more conflict, more engagement metrics. He hesitated momentarily before adding, "I saw the production notes for tonight's segment. They specifically directed her to confront Keanu aggressively about his beliefs." Screenshots followed, internal memos suggesting specific lines, jokes designed to provoke, prompts deliberately crafted to mock and belittle. The hashtag #RespectFaith began trending within hours. What had begun as a routine celebrity interview now appeared increasingly like a calculated ambush. But the strategy had backfired spectacularly because Keanu hadn't engaged in argument, he hadn't raised his voice or attempted to win the exchange. He had simply remained authentic to himself. Additional voices joined the growing online conversation: actors, musicians, individuals from diverse backgrounds. There's profound strength in stillness. Faith doesn't require volume to demonstrate power. What happened to basic human respect? This man displayed more grace through silence than the entire program has shown throughout its broadcast history. Even people with no religious affiliations contributed to the discourse, not defending specific belief systems, but advocating for the fundamental right to hold personal beliefs without ridicule. The conversation's tone had shifted dramatically. Diana maintained public silence initially, no posts, no official statements. Then, late that night, a message appeared on her verified social media account: "Some moments during live television aren't scripted or planned, they're simply human. Tonight, I was authentically human, and I'm still processing what that means for me personally." Comments flooded in, some expressing anger, others offering forgiveness, many simply asking one essential question: why? Backstage revelations continued emerging. One former production assistant posted, "They assured us Keanu wouldn't create controversy, that he was too polite and professional to respond confrontationally. What they didn't anticipate was that his silence would communicate everything essential." News organizations picked up the developing story. Journalists debated its implications. Religious leaders offered perspectives. Psychologists appeared on morning programs to analyze the psychological impact of moral stillness in contemporary media landscapes. Even satirical programs covered the unfolding situation, though with unusual reverence, admitting, "It's strange to acknowledge, but something about that particular moment made everyone stop laughing." Throughout the growing cultural conversation, Keanu maintained public silence: no interviews, no formal statements, no quoted remarks. But he shared one thing: a single image, his cross pendant resting atop a closed book. No caption accompanied the image. The post was shared over 6 million times within 24 hours. People offered their own interpretations in response, for those who maintain quiet dignity while under fire. The book appears closed, but the message speaks volumes. In the days that followed, the conversation only expanded. Think pieces proliferated from diverse perspectives, some praising Keanu's composure, others critiquing the program's ethical standards, many exploring the deeper cultural hunger for meaning in a society that often ridicules sincere belief. Diana eventually granted an interview to another network. She appeared visibly exhausted, stripped of glamour and production enhancements. Her voice was subdued. "I didn't expect to experience any emotional response, I truly didn't anticipate that." But he didn't argue or counter-attack, he simply listened with complete attention. "I think that triggered something within me I wasn't prepared to confront." What had begun as a typical celebrity interview had evolved into a cultural reflection point. But during the next live broadcast, when Keanu returned to the stage, something occurred that no camera, no script, no social media algorithm could have predicted. The network wasted no time. Barely a week after the initial interview aired, they announced a follow-up appearance: Keanu Reeves, live again. This time, however, the promotional messaging differed significantly: no sarcasm, no catchy taglines, just the simple promise of a conversation that moved the world. When the evening arrived, the studio reached capacity. Lines of people extended around the building, many holding signs expressing solidarity. Silence speaks volumes. Faith isn't a character flaw. More authenticity, less noise. Inside, the energy felt electric, not like before, where audiences waited eagerly for opportunities to laugh at others' expense, but as if something genuinely significant was about to unfold, a collective breath held in anticipation. Keanu entered the studio exactly as he had before, quietly composed, wearing the same cross pendant around his neck. Diana greeted him with visible nervousness, her tone gentler, more measured, with unmistakable vulnerability. "Keanu," she began hesitantly, "thank you for returning." He nodded and offered a small, genuine smile. "Thank you for the invitation," he responded simply. She opened with a gentle question about his experience following their previous conversation, but before he could respond, something unprecedented occurred. The studio lights flickered, not a subtle dimming but a sharp, sudden fluctuation. The monitors behind them momentarily glitched. The audience gasped quietly. A sound technician leaned forward urgently in the control booth. Then, complete silence. The microphones cut out. The lighting dimmed to near darkness. The ambient hum of studio equipment vanished. For 10 full seconds, the entire set descended into stillness so complete it felt otherworldly, almost sacred. Keanu remained motionless, hands resting gently on his lap, the cross visible even in the dim emergency lighting. Diana stared at him, frozen in place. No one in the audience moved or spoke. Even the technical crew seemed uncertain whether to intervene. Then everything returned to normal, lights stabilized, sound restored, screens refreshed to their standard displays. But something fundamental had shifted in the atmosphere. Diana sat in stunned silence, her eyes welling with emotion, not from fear, but from something deeper, something internal and transformative. She turned toward Keanu, her voice trembling slightly, "I don't know how to explain what just happened." Keanu regarded her with quiet certainty. "It was never about winning an argument," he said softly. "It was about touching a soul." For a moment, time seemed to pause again. The audience didn't applaud or vocalize, they simply remained present, with him, with her, with themselves. It was as if, for a single collective breath, every person in that room reconnected with something they had long forgotten: stillness, presence, reverence for the sacred. The narrator's voice returned. "There are moments that defy logical explanation, occurrences that science might categorize as malfunction, coincidence, or technical error. But what if it wasn't merely that? What if, for the briefest heartbeat of time, something greater than ourselves acknowledged our attention?" Later, technical experts would attribute the silence to a system reboot, an electrical surge, a studio programming glitch. But no one truly accepted those explanations, not after witnessing the expression in Diana's eyes, not after observing how Keanu sat unperturbed, as if he had somehow anticipated it, not after experiencing how it felt to be present in that moment. That clip, 10 seconds of darkness followed by 10 seconds of complete silence, would become the most viewed segment in the program's broadcast history. Not because anything was verbally expressed, but because something profound was collectively experienced. That moment, which superficially appeared to be a mere technical malfunction, would become one of the most replayed, analyzed, and deeply personal media experiences ever shared online. And what Keanu would do afterward would reach even the most skeptical hearts. The video of that extraordinary silence, those 10 suspended seconds during the live broadcast, exploded across internet platforms. It appeared everywhere, talk shows replayed it, analysts examined it frame by frame, podcast hosts transformed it into extended metaphors. Some insisted it was merely a technical failure, others claimed it represented something transcendent. But what no one could deny was its profound impact on viewers. Millions watched it repeatedly, not to understand what had technically occurred, but to reconnect with what it had made them feel, that unusual stillness, that inexplicable sense of peace. In a world of constant noise and commentary, it had communicated more than any verbal argument possibly could. Keanu didn't issue any formal statement afterward. He didn't grant follow-up interviews or offer explanations. He simply posted a single photograph, a wooden table, a well-worn book closed atop it, his cross pendant resting gently on the cover. The caption read simply, "Sometimes silence is the most powerful answer." It didn't require trending algorithms or hashtag campaigns, it found its own path into people's hearts. Diana shared her own message a day later, no makeup, no professional lighting, just her looking directly into her phone camera. Her voice was clear, though gentler than her on-air persona. "I didn't fully understand what I was doing that night. I thought I was in control. I believed the objective was to win the exchange. But he made no attempt to win, he simply held space for authentic connection." She paused momentarily before adding, "And perhaps, just perhaps, something greater than ourselves did speak to me that night, and I finally stopped laughing long enough to actually listen." Contrary to expectations, internet culture didn't cancel her. Surprisingly, it embraced her vulnerability, because people recognized something in her emotional breakthrough, not weakness or professional failure, but a moment of genuine honesty, a moment that mirrored something within themselves. Soon afterward, a movement began to take shape. The hashtag #MyFaithIsNotAfault flooded social media platforms, not as protests supporting Keanu, but as personal testimony. People from all backgrounds began sharing their experiences. A woman wrote, "I stopped wearing my religious symbol after colleagues mocked it. Today, I put it back on." A teenager shared, "I never believed in anything spiritual, but maybe I can begin believing in inner peace." A man from Brazil posted, "My mother always prayed for me. I consistently dismissed her. Today I call to thank her." Religious communities, meditation circles, and spiritual groups of various traditions shared the same fundamental message: faith doesn't need to announce itself loudly to be powerful. Meanwhile, news networks invited specialists to comment on the phenomenon. Some attempted to explain the silence moment through technological factors, a voltage fluctuation, a software failure. But others explored deeper implications. One neurologist observed, "The human body responds to that footage similarly to how it reacts to sacred music or profound meditation: reduced heart rate, decreased stress hormones." What happened in that studio affected viewers on a physiological level. A therapist noted, "We've become unaccustomed to witnessing people maintain space without engaging in conflict." That moment represented an emotional reset, culturally, collectively. It transcended agreement or disagreement. It reminded us of something we had collectively forgotten, that grace, presence, and truth don't require volume to be effective. At the studio, Diana stepped away from the program temporarily, not amid scandal or dramatic headlines. She simply posted, "Some conversations matter more than content. Thank you, Keanu." He didn't respond publicly, but one day later, an image appeared on his rarely used social media, a candle illuminated beside a folded note that read simply, "You were heard." The narrator returned for a final reflection. Keanu Reeves made no attempt to preach or proselytize. He didn't argue or raise his voice. He carried profound pain without weaponizing it. And in a culture addicted to noise and confrontation, he reminded us all, faith isn't weakness, and silence can be sacred. As the final segments played, a montage appeared, a child in a hospital room watching the clip, whispering, "That's what inner peace looks like." A father embracing his daughter at an airport terminal, both wearing faith symbols openly. A diverse group of strangers gathered on a rooftop at sunset, phones powered off, simply breathing together in community. And finally, Keanu walking alone through a tranquil park, the sun setting behind him, the cross resting gently against his chest. And perhaps this narrative was never truly about television. Perhaps it was never exclusively about Keanu Reeves. Perhaps this represents the awakening of something within all of us, the kind of faith that doesn't need to shout to be heard, the kind of truth that speaks most clearly through how we live rather than what we claim. Have you ever experienced a moment when silence was more powerful than any words? When standing in your truth quietly made more impact than arguing loudly? Share your story in the comments below. And if this story touched something in you, don't forget to like, subscribe Motivation for Success, and hit that notification bell to never miss another moment that reminds us all that in a world of endless noise, true power often speaks in whispers.